My name is Jen Harmshaw, and I'm here to talk a bit about something which might feel like a slightly different flavour from some of the other sessions you've had today. And it's specifically around the department and how we communicate with you digitally. So I guess the sort of major theme of the conversations today have been how you as leaders and school business professionals, the pressures that you face, the challenges that you're facing at the moment. And so really where I'm coming into this sort of conversation is really thinking about how can the Department for Education and the way we work with you be something that actually is a source of support and help rather than friction and difficulty, given the other many roles that you have to undertake on a day-to-day basis. I'm quite short and I'm actually having to stand on my tiptoes to see over this thing, so hopefully I'm not just getting the very top of my head. So I'll continue to stand like this. So a slightly different flavour today. And I think sort of the other thing I'd say about this is it's really good to be able to come and talk to you and meet with people in person. And I'm sure that for many of you, most of your experience of engaging with the Department for Education isn't a human. It isn't a person on the end of a phone, a person coming to visit you in your school. It's a very long piece of guidance that we've published, or a digital service, or a return that you have to complete. And really, we understand that actually, for many people in the sector, your experience of working with the Department for Education is about how you kind of navigate a digital relationship with us rather than actually have a proper conversation. So I want to talk a little bit about what are we doing about that, where we are now, what have we learned from you about what we can improve on that, and what are we doing about it next. So I've been in DFE for 22 years, and I've seen over that time the scale at which our guidance, our documentation and our use of digital has massively changed, massively ramped up over that period. And we're now at a point where actually that footprint of all of the things that we provide to you online is huge. It's genuinely massive, and we've been doing some number crunching on that. So at last count, we think the number of pages available to you on gov.uk is something like 11,000. We also offer hundreds of different digital services. And just sort of a language point here, I mean anything where we're asking you to transact with us. It might be things like a data collection, school census, good example. It might be published pieces of, it might be things where we're asking for like a financial return, or it might be things where we're providing support, like schools buying service and teacher vacancy service are good examples of where information flows between us as a way of supporting people to do a task. So there are hundreds of those different digital services and data collections. There's lots of different pages of guidance out there. And there are also some things that we pay for or support or commission that are actually outside of the sort of DFE branding as well. So there's even more from us. So it's a huge volume and it's really varied. So we, as you know, we have like lots of pages of sort of PDF style guidance. We have email communications. We have various different kind of contact centres. We have data collections, and we have these transactional digital services. So there's lots of different kinds of things, lots of things. And actually the way in which we know that many of those are set up and run for you are not always the same. So really great example of that, and I expect to see a little grimacing in the audience, is around how you log in to things and the sorts of different passwords you have to remember on a day-to-day basis to send things to DFE. And sometimes that's really painful. And I should also say I have worked in a multi-academy trust as well as being in DFE. And so I've been on the receiving end of this, and I know how sort of full of friction it can sometimes feel. So there's a huge amount of information that DFE provides to you as school leaders and school business professionals in a really complex range of ways. And the impact of that overall, the cumulative effect of that sort of volume, is that it makes people's lives more difficult than it might need to be. So that sort of awareness of where we're doing things that are helpful, awareness of where we're introducing new requirements, mandatory requirements in particular, can feel really uncertain for people. Knowing where to look. You might have heard of something spotted in an email, but being able to then go back to it can be really tricky. And that sort of friction of things being done inconsistently, so you have to sort of relearn a system every time you come to it, can be really challenging for people. And from the department's angle, actually, in some ways it makes us less effective the way that we're working like this. It means that we can't provide support direct to those for whom it's most relevant and who we, are particularly trying to sort of target and assist. It makes it much more difficult to do that. And it also prevents us from having a really powerful overview of how these different conflicting demands add up to you. So these are things that we really want to address. And the mission of my team, which is funded by part of the SRM programme, is really to completely pivot that. And this is going to take a number of years to do. But what we want to do from this is actually make sure that when you, as professionals in the education sector, work with DFE, what you get is to see the services that are relevant to you. We want you to be able to tell us things just once, not repeatedly across different services. And we want you to be able to log in using one login, not lots of them. Those are our guiding principles. They sound pretty basic and simple, and I feel like they're fairly unarguable in terms of a positive goal to aim for, that these are the sorts of things that you should expect from us when you try to interact with us online. But given that mishmash of lots and lots of different types of things that we're doing at the moment, where do we start? How, if we're going to achieve this mission of improving our digital offer to you, where do we begin? So for the last 6 months or so, we have been out there talking to you, visiting schools, trying to learn more about how you undertake your day-to-day roles, and making sure that we've got a firmer view of where can we have really powerful impact. So what I'm going to do in the rest of this presentation is actually play back to you some of the key findings that we got back, which is guiding our next stage of work. And given that it's a relatively small audience now left at the end of the day, it would be really good if at the end we can kind of get a little bit of a show of hands as to whether or not these sorts of points of learning that we've got actually resonate with you. So what we learnt, first of all, is that in the first instance, most people rely on emails from DFE or from ESFA to know what it is we're doing and to keep up to date. Those emails are a crucial part that almost every user we spoke to really talked about that being their sort of lifeblood of knowing what it is the DFE is asking for. So there are actually more than one email from DFE, obviously, so people said that they signed up to really as many as they can, and they found that whilst information might be duplicated across them, it was helpful because they felt a little bit more confident that they weren't going to miss so many things. And then the other kind of feedback we got from you is that actually nobody really tends to use gov.uk. What you do is you type things into Google where you remember the name of that thing that we did, or you create a bookmark for it. So I think everybody in an Academy Trust probably has some sort of, in relevant roles, has a bookmark for the Academy's financial handbook, for example, was one that a lot of people talked about them having a bookmark relating to. So actually, unless you know the name of a thing that we do, and unless you've saved it already, your reliance is currently mainly on emails. But that has a bit of a fatal flaw, which is that it can be quite hard to remember exactly which email to go back to for that thing you saw 3 weeks ago. And I've experienced this myself when working in an Academy Trust. It can be challenging to make sure that you're always hitting the things that are most relevant to you. And it really does generate this sort of idea of like not being absolutely sure that you're not going to miss out on anything. And so really crucially for us is we have taken away from this that people are reliant on emails, because what it does is it helps people to feel like they've got a grip of new information that's coming from DFE. The second thing we heard really loud and clear from people is that actually there's a huge range of information and guidance out there which relates to mandatory activity, tasks which are essential for compliance, and people are looking for reassurance for the things that they must do. I think that's really important, because although many people who are very experienced in the sector know what those essential things are and are comfortable and confident in them, they know what time of the year things are happening, whether or not that's maybe, you know, admissions or around various different sort of major returns, like sort of big financial deadlines. People will be familiar with it, but when anything changes, it's not always something that people feel incredibly confident about. So making sure that we're really clear about those tasks and those activities which are needed for legal compliance was one that we heard as being exceptionally important to people. And given that people just want to keep up to date with what's new and what they have to do, multiple people, school business professionals, academy trust leaders that we spoke to said, can we just have a one-stop shop? Can you just show it in one place, please? And that came up a lot of different times. So people wanted to not have to keep bookmarking information and have one single place to go. And it really came from an appreciation that schools are busy doing lots of other things and really don't need to be spending additional time Googling and searching around different bits of the department's online content to make sure that they're confident that they're up to date. So at the moment, we know that there are various third parties out there who do things that are a bit like a one-stop shop. So I think things like the Key, the school bus, lots of local authorities have a place that people can go to and feel that they have reliable information that they're getting. But there are certain things where it's really only the DfE who you're going to be interacting with to, for example, submit in a particular return. So what we've really heard from people is that even though there are these other services out there which try and pull together information, there's still a need and a desire for people to have one place that they can go to feel like they're up to date with DfE. That in itself is also challenging though, going back several slides to the sheer amount of the stuff. How do you make a one-stop shop for 11,000 pages? It's kind of challenging. So we've been thinking about how do we tailor the information we provide to people. So if you're somebody who is working in a multi-academy trust, for example, do you want to know about everything that's relevant that also accounts for local authority maintained schools? And the key piece of feedback we got back from everybody was actually personalisation is about showing the things that are relevant and on offer for my type of school or my trust. It's really vital that people are able to see personalisation at that level. But actually we also heard back from people that for anything else, you in your school know your school's context best and you want to be able to see what's out there to take decisions yourself for what might be relevant. So people were really clear to us that actually if we can provide you with the information in a navigable, digestible way, we don't need to do a lot of personalisation. We need to show you the things that's relevant for your school type, but then let you be the ones in control of deciding how to drill down further into that. And I think that's really important because we don't know all of we have a lot of data on your schools, but we don't necessarily know some of the wider things that you might be thinking about or planning. We don't necessarily know about things that you've done before. So it really is better if we can get it to a point where you feel confident that you're choosing the information that's relevant to you, rather than DfE failing to show you something that you might need to come back to later. And we do really recognise that local authorities are a vital part of this. So the feedback about should we provide information in a personalised way also needs to take into account where local authorities also have a really good relationship with many of the maintained schools in their area. And we wanted to make sure that as we look at any kind of personalisation, we're not necessarily supplanting the role that the local authorities already play. Have I gone back? Oh, yeah, so some of the sorts of things we've looked at and started to prototype are ways in which we could support schools to select whether or not they're an academy or a maintained school, or whether or not we get people to log in, and we can show that to you up front. And I think the last kind of major learning point, and certainly not least, was kind of show us the money. People really wanted to be able to see all of the available funding pots that are currently on offer. Where are new things, advanced warning of when is a new funding pot going to become available? How will I apply to it? What are the things that might be, available and relevant to me? So people are really, really keen to see more about the, have one place to look for funding. And I think that really reflects the fact that lots of different parts of the DFE fund in different ways and have different grant programmes, and not all of them run through the same kind of payment processes. So unfortunately, I think that means that for you, you're having to navigate the fact that there are multiple different teams in the Department for Education, rather than the fact that you want to see and be able to access the funding that your school might be able to make a bid for or be eligible for. So that came up as a really powerful message. So I'm just going to pause there for a second. Did people feel like those things resonated with you? Do those all sort of make sense to you? Or is there any sort of major points that you feel like are missing? And is anybody willing to not be shy and put your hand up? I had a bit of nodding. So I shall take that as we're not a million miles off. I'm sure you'll tell me if there's anything in those that felt entirely wrong. So we're working on it. We're doing something about it. And we are currently in a process of making changes to our digital services. So one of the things I mentioned right at the beginning was around identity management and logins. And we are in the process of making sure that all of the different digital services for schools and multi-academy trusts all use the same login credentials, so you don't have multiple ones to remember, and making improvements to those login services. So it is easier, because I know at the moment sometimes people find that they're limited across an organisation, and it can be hard to access things when certain members of staff aren't around, and that causes a lot of pain and friction. So we are moving all of our logins to a single system. And we are creating now a new and improved sort of, I guess, like a homepage, a digital interface that you'd be able to log into. And what we're looking for that to do primarily is focus on showing you mandatory tasks, showing you when those things are due, clear kind of calendar or timeline of things that are due. We're looking at making sure that the other kind of content is actually brigaded in a way which you can navigate and has meaningful titles and sits together and is organised clearly. We want to have pages which show you the list of available funding opportunities, those which are open now, those which are coming soon, and any which have recently closed. We're also keen to make sure that we're differentiating at a proportionate level, so taking into account that idea of personalisation. We do want it in time, make sure that we're showing you views which are appropriate for whether or not you're working across a multi-academy trust with lots of different schools, if you're in an individual academy, or if you're in a local authority maintained schools, making sure that in each of those types of instances, what you're able to see and access is relevant to that context. We want to make it easier to access support and help. Again, that's an area where lots of different digital approaches have different support mechanisms in place, and we want to make that easier for people as well. So these are some of the key things that we're looking at in the first instance, and our plan is to begin with things which are relating to school funding and finance. And we have been sort of trialling and prototyping and designing lots of different ways in which we can make that interface work. And we haven't finished yet. We're trying it out and we are testing it with people. But some of the sorts of things that we're looking at exactly speak to those issues that we raised around visibility of mandatory tasks, ease of navigation of services and guidance, easy access to support, latest news and guidance, all in a way which you log in and see them relevant for your type of school. So those are things that we've been sort of beginning to prototype and test. We've spoken to lots of different people about what we're doing, and the feedback has been really positive. People seem really happy when they get a chance to click through it. And so the next stages for us is that from September, we will be piloting and trialling that with a bigger number of people before making it a live public service. So we're starting in the area of finance, but over time, we expect to expand that so it covers a much wider range of schools' activities, because we know you do a lot of different things, and it isn't, it isn't enough if we only capture smaller subsets of the Department for Education's activity. So we have to start somewhere, but our view is very much that we want to make this a genuine one-stop shop for people. Getting the language right and knowing what on earth to call this thing has caused our team much consternation, and is something that we're always welcome feedback on. We don't quite know how to sort of help people get to the beginning point of what is this thing, what is this one-stop shop. So things like management, business and school and support are all sort of up there as crucial sort of things that we want to make sure that you understand what this new homepage will do for you. So we're still working on getting all of the language right and making sure it's something that speaks to you and is in the language that you use day to day in your school. But we're going to continue to need help to develop this. We can only do this by working with you to understand how this fits into your day-to-day role, how this can make your life easier. And we would like to, really genuinely open up opportunities if you would like to be involved in any of this, to kind of give us views on what you see as the biggest issues and points of friction you experience when you're trying to work with DFE through our emails, through our different logged in digital services, through our data collections. We're really keen to hear about where you feel those pain points. If you've got any great ideas of it would be great if you could just, we love those. We think those are also really, really helpful. And we've had quite a lot of people suggest to us things around being able to see data that you've previously submitted. So that one definitely on our list. But do tell us if you have any great ideas for things that you think we can do to improve how we work with you. If you are willing to volunteer yourselves or others in your schools to actually be part of our testing group looking at this new service that we're piloting, we would love it if you would get in touch using that email address there, and we will keep you on our books and start to show you versions probably from September-ish. And if there's anything that we do where you spot that we haven't realised, we haven't acknowledged a mandatory task or mandatory activity that you have to do in this service, that is one of the things that we also really need help with, because we know there's so many things that you are responsible for taking forward on a day-to-day basis. So please expect more from DFE in terms of our digital service provision. We want to work with you better. We want to have a relationship where the information we provide online is easy to access, helpful to you, supports you in doing your role. But we can only get there if you are able to work with us and point us in the right direction. So please do get in touch. Thank you.